No one expected this. And following the Maple Leafs' massive win against the Washington Capitals in the back of Mitch Marner, one player on the Toronto Maple Leafs has exceeded all expectations thus far and has been absolutely phenomenal. We'll break that down as well as discuss some comments from both Mitch Marner and John Tavares on the season thus far, and they had some very interesting things to say. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, if you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content, and we're on the road to 14,000 subscribers, and subscribing's free, so make sure to hit that button. But Darius, a lot to go over today. Obviously, we had a big win yesterday against the Washington Capitals in the back of a few different players, but obviously Mitch Marner was at the forefront of it, and it's time we have a conversation about Mitch Marner, because what he's doing this season is a lot of fans, I don't think, expected him to play this well, both offensively and defensively. And again, you were on record saying that he was going to be one of the players who had a very good season. It is a contract year, but the way that he's bought into Craig Berube's system has been wild, and it's time we talk about Mitch Marner. We're also going to dive into some OEL stuff as well here towards the end. But in yesterday's game, the Leafs win a road game after trailing by multiple goals with less than 5 minutes left in the third period for the first time in over a decade, December 6, 2010, which was against the Capitals, which is funny how that works. But Darius, Mitch Marner has been, he's been absolutely lights out. In the last 10 games, he has 4 goals, 11 assists, 15 points, 11 game tying or go-ahead points, extension, question mark. We'll get into the extension in a little bit here, but he's been great offensively and especially defensively as well, which is something that we hadn't seen as much in years past. And in light of Austin Matthews being out the past handful of games and maybe a little bit longer, he stepped up and done exactly what they needed him to do, and he's a reason the Leafs somehow have a 10-6-2 record.
And he was a big reason as to why the Leafs won last night. And the last time that happened, as you saw before, was December 6, 2010, which was the first time Grabowski scored a spinorama in a shootout, if those of you remember that one. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever back then. But that just shows, how long it's been. But yeah, Mitch Marner, he has been fantastic so far this season. We talked a little bit about it in the summer. Will they trade him? Can they trade him? Are they going to sign him? But one thing was for sure, I think, some Leaf fans at least, because a lot of people were really hard on him during the summer, but some Leaf fans, including me, knew that he was going to come into this season, once that all settled in the summer, and he was going to have a phenomenal season once he figured it out, because the play style was going to change a little bit. There are some question marks around the physicality still, and we're going to have to see how that plays out over the course of the season and, of course, in the playoffs. But one thing's for sure, he's putting up points and he's playing very responsible defensively. That was the one thing I noticed early in the season when a lot of people were getting on him for not scoring as much, even though he's quietly put together a great offensive season. He's been really good defensively, and not just 5-on-5, the penalty kill. He's been brilliant on the penalty kill as well. So he has been fantastic for the Leafs this year. And at times last night, I've said it before, the Leafs have a couple guys making north of $10 million, and you have to be able to take over a game. And there were times last night where I saw him potential, there was potential for him to take over the game. He was really driving play. So I want to see more of that out of him, but he's been great. The stats are undeniable so far this year.
Yeah, and he was the one who scored the goal to tie the game, like you saw in the intro there. And he has 11 game tying or go-ahead points, which is a ridiculous stat considering we're only 18 games into this season. And you mentioned it. The biggest thing so far earlier in the season was about, hey, will the Toronto Maple Leafs be able to sustain without Austin Matthews, being, not playing the same level that he was last season, with him obviously not scoring a ton of goals, and then he went down with injury, and then Mitch Marner obviously has stepped up in his absence. He's not known as a goal scorer, but he's been scoring. He's been scoring a fair few amount of goals, especially for him, like 4 goals in 10 games. He is one of the better passers and one of the better facilitators in all of the NHL. But when he's scoring goals, that's obviously puts him over the top, and it's what led to them having a huge victory. And he had some interesting comments as well from Mitch Marner. I thought we did a great job of sticking with our pressure, staying up ice, and making plays. We had to get pucks to each other and do a good job as a unit, and fortunately, we got the pucks back. We just had to stay patient with it, and we got what we wanted from it. And it's true. If you watched the game yesterday, the first 2 periods are some of the worst periods I've watched in a very long time. It was some of the worst of the year, arguably the worst 2 periods of the year, but they still managed to beat a very solid goaltender in Logan Thompson, who's having a very hot start to his season. And it was on the back of a lot of different guys, like John Tavares as well, which we'll get into momentarily here. But what were your thoughts on this comment from Mitch Marner?
I like it from Mitch Marner. And I think, sometimes even myself, I get carried away and I'm like, the Leafs should crush teams. It should be 6-0 after the first period. And I think we all want that from the Leafs. But what he's saying about staying patient is true. They have to continue to buy into what they're doing here. It's a different caliber of hockey and just continue to have their foot on the gas. And that's what they did last night. And on the second half of a back-to-back, that's a welcome change. That's a breath of fresh air. So I like the quote from Mitch Marner, honestly, because, sometimes he gives us nothing, absolutely nothing that we can take from. But I do like that. And I like how the Leafs continue to push, because they could have folded last night very easily. And it looked like that's the way it was going, especially after Nyes' goal was disallowed. And they didn't do that. They continued to push, especially Matthew Nyes, creating that Nylander goal. And then obviously the final minute, great play by John Tavares to win the faceoff. And then obviously Mitch Marner scores. So they've been great so far this year. And I'm slowly starting to, and I've been saying it, 15 to 20 games in, I think we were going to start to see it. I'm slowly starting to see some of the bad habits fade. They're still there, but some of them are fading. And I hope that keeps trending in that direction. And this is a new caliber of hockey that Craig Berube has brought.
Yeah, and you mentioned John Tavares. Let's dive into him a little bit. This overtime winner last night, he recorded his 77th career game-winning goal, tying Patrick Kane for the sixth most among all active skaters. And John Tavares had a great game in his own right. Obviously, he's been having a very great season so far, and a lot of the guys are stepping up. We obviously saw off of the great save from Joseph Wall in last night's game. It led to a breakaway to a degree, but not as easy of a breakaway. Probably one of the harder breakaways of John Tavares' career, and he also ultimately put it in the net. But he also had some comments like I alluded to there, and he says, yeah, we stuck with it. This is about yesterday's game. It wasn't a perfect game, but we felt a lot better about our play in the second period. Obviously, their lead grew, but we started putting the game more in our favor and doing a better job. Talked about staying with it. Couple of goals that didn't count. Feel differently about those, and that's the way it goes. We found a way to stay with it and earn 2 points with some big saves by Joe, especially in overtime right before I scored. And Craig Berube came out after the game and gave a lot of praise to Joseph Wall, who had a very solid game as well, especially the big save in overtime there, which led to John Tavares' goal. And I think just the team sticking with it in a game where, again, 2 goals were disallowed, the Matthew Nyes one, and of course there was some penalty drama surrounding Matthew Nyes as well, which ultimately got overturned, and of course the Lorentz goal that got disallowed because of kicking. So there was a lot of different things going against the Leafs. Not a game the Leafs should have necessarily deserved to win, but they stuck with it. They pushed back in the second period, and thanks to John Tavares, they were able to win this game, and it was big for him.
It was big. It was a big game for John Tavares and Mitch Marner and Joseph Wall. Like I've said, he hasn't necessarily lost them a game yet. Obviously, you want a couple more saves from him, but he hasn't. He's been pretty decent. And a couple factors in that overtime, too, very quickly before we move on, is Mitch Marner was great in that overtime. Obviously, John Tavares with the breakaway had to cut like almost a 90-degree angle with the puck to score that, which was pretty impressive. But Joseph Wall stopping the soon-to-be best goal scorer of all time point blank in overtime. It was great, and the Leafs get a much-needed 2 points.
Yeah, and one other thing before we wrap up, quick note, OEL, congratulations to him. He's now in the 1,000 games played club, and he's had a phenomenal and a huge impact on the Toronto Maple Leafs. We saw him open up overtime in yesterday's game, which was interesting. And again, as he continues to, again, he's going to be with the Leafs now he's on a 4-year deal, so he's going to be here. This is year 1 of many for him, and his impact is immediately being shown. So shout out to him, and they have some free dinner going on here, which is always good. The team seems pretty close, and regarding Mitch Marner extension, do you have any quick thoughts on that before we wrap up? Maybe it's more likely now than it was before. The team's bonding well, but I think ultimately it'll matter on what happens. It'll depend, on what happens in the playoffs.
I think that's exactly it. That my feeling on that hasn't changed, and I think that's where probably both parties stand. I really don't think it's going to get done during the year, and it really, really depends what happens in the playoffs. And I don't know. We've seen the same result the last couple of years in a row, so it's going to be interesting. It's a new coach, new mentality. We'll see what happens, but I think they're going to try and sign him. But I think it really depends on what happens in the playoffs, and feelings could change at that point in time.
Let us know what your thoughts are on that down below. What your thoughts are on Mitch Marner, and do you think an extension should happen soon? Let us know. See you later.